All right, we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly virtual chai chat. My name is Gulshan, and I'm with American Center Tashkent. So today it's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker, Naomi Messer. Hi, Naomi.
Hi.
Naomi is an intern at American Councils for International Education in Uzbekistan, and she's working virtually from New York. And she's a rising senior at Yale University, where she studies Russian and Central Asian studies. In her spare time, Naomi enjoys running, watching TV, and baking. And today, Naomi will speak about New York, where she's from. And that's our great pleasure that following today's program, we will have series of chai chats with Naomi, where she will be covering different topics that our audience was interested in. So please stay tuned about that. And also, we're joined today by American Kona Karshi. Hi, guys. Oh, let me, for some reason. Okay, we can hear you. Hi, guys.
Again? Yes, hello.
Oh, yeah, now we can hear you. Great. So they are going to be watching Naomi's presentation with us and participate in a Q&A session. Thank you guys for joining us. It's a great pleasure to have you.
We're happy to be here.
Thank you. And as usual, please, our audience, if you have questions, please put them in the comments below this video and Naomi will answer them after the presentation. So let's start. Naomi, I'm giving the floor to you.
Thank you so much, Gulshan, and thank you to everybody for coming. Good afternoon. It's pretty early here in New York, but I'm very excited to get started and talk to you a little bit about where I'm from. So this is actually the flag of New York. In the middle, you can see this is the Hudson Valley, or the Hudson River, which is one of the most famous and important rivers in all of New York. And our motto in New York State is Excelsior, which means ever upward. And below this is the motto of the United States, which is E pluribus unum, out of many one. And so I know this presentation is called New York Today, but it is impossible to cover it all. New York is not just New York City. There's a big state, as you can see, it borders a lot of other states, and it's about a fourth the size of Uzbekistan, so it's huge. There's 20 million people in a diverse set of landscapes and cities, plenty of places that I've never visited or even heard of in some cases. And so it's hard to sum it up into one presentation. So today, I think I'm going to focus pretty much on the part of New York that I know best, Manhattan, where I live, but I'd still like to talk to you a little bit about New York State more generally. So here are some other cool places in New York that you might not have heard about. So as you can see, New York borders Canada up here, Pennsylvania, New Jersey down here, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont. So it's a huge state, a lot of different parts. And there are a lot of great places to visit outside of New York City. The first landmark I'm going to discuss is Niagara Falls, which is here. They are the largest waterfalls in America, and every year millions of tourists go to take a boat under the waterfalls and get soaked. Here are the Thousand Islands, which are it's an archipelago, which is a series of little islands also pretty close to the border of Canada. You can see here that they're really, really beautiful, and there are a lot of castles and stuff like that. Here is Lake Placid, which is known for being a really good place for skiing and other sorts of winter sports. It's very close to Vermont, as you can see, and it's actually so good for winter sports that not one but two Winter Olympics have been held there. In the center of New York here are the Finger Lakes. If you can see, they sort of look like little fingers. And it is a region known for its excellent wines and beautiful landscapes. I think you can see that here, beautiful falls. And then my favorite part of New York, except for, New York City, where I'm from, is the Hudson Valley, which is right here. It's located along the Hudson River, which is, as I mentioned before, a really important river to New York State and New York commerce, which runs all the way from here down to here and along the side of Manhattan. And it has many farms and a lot of beautiful trees and bridges and stuff like that. It's a really, really beautiful place to go sightseeing. Now, a little bit to the west of New York City, we have Long Island, which is a really popular place in the summer, and it has beautiful beaches. So as you can see from these pictures, New York, not just New York City, is great all year round. From summer trips to Long Island and the Thousand Islands, winter trips to Lake Placid, and autumn visits to the Finger Lakes and the Hudson Valley to look at the fall foliage, and Niagara Falls pretty much all year round. It freezes over in the winter, which is really cool. And so without further ado, New York, on Wednesday, I walked almost 20 kilometers all around Manhattan to bring you guys exclusive photos of the coolest places in New York, or at least what I think are the coolest places, and I hope you enjoy. So our first stop is Central Park, which is right here, right smack in the middle of Manhattan. You can see it's very, very large. And it is one of the most famous parks in the world. And it's often featured in movies or TV shows about New York. This might come as a surprise to some of you, but actually in the 1800s, all of this part of New York was actually mostly farmland, and it was pretty agricultural. As the population began to boom, there were calls for the creation of public space and a public park that could be used for all. As you can imagine, if people are moving in and there's no parks anywhere, it's going to become pretty stuffy and unlivable. The park was hugely expensive to construct. It actually cost around the same as the purchase of Alaska, but it was a really good investment in my opinion. Today, the park is heavily used by New York residents as their backyards. If you go out in the summer months, you can see people sunbathing or tanning right here, which is the Great Lawn. And it contains everything from a theater. In the summers, they put on productions of Shakespeare in the Park, which has become popular in other parts of America. There is a boathouse where you can row. There's a big reservoir in the middle right here. A swimming pool, baseball diamonds, an obelisk, a castle, which is here, and it's known for bird watching. They have a lot of information on how to do bird watching in Belvedere Castle. Baseball diamonds, a swimming pool, an ice skating rink, and a zoo. So pretty much anything you might want in one park is available there. In addition to the zoo, there are many animals that call Central Park home, including many ducks and turtles. Here's the turtle pond where a lot of them live. Squirrels like this one. I know it's not so exciting, but they're a big part of Central Park life. And tons of birds and hawks. Pretty recently, a snowy owl, which is this cute little bird here, was spotted in Central Park for the first time in 130 years. It was a major attraction and many people came out to see it. Central Park is also known for its bird watching, so a lot of people who are avid bird watchers like to go and see what's there. There's always something to do in Central Park anytime you go, from concerts to movie screenings to exercise classes to pick up basketball games to even just hanging out with family and friends. Our next stop is the Met. The Metropolitan Museum of Arts, or the Met, is one of the best art museums in the world, and it's located right next to Central Park right here. The Met has beautiful and extensive collections from almost any time period and place. Pretty much anything you could think of that would be considered art is, from musical instruments to different sorts of architecture to even battle armor, you can find it at the Met. Unfortunately, when I visited on Wednesday, the Met was closed, but I still want to show you some of my favorite parts of the Met collection. I really like the American wing, which is here. As you can see, it's located in this really beautiful atrium, and there's light streaming down. And what they did is they took the exterior of a bank from the 1800s, and they put it right in the middle of their building. And so you walk inside and there are all these different rooms, and it's like you're walking into this big house, and each room is showing a different part of American history. Because what the Met did is they would buy old houses, historically important houses, and they recreated the room. So you can not only see the beauty of the handiwork, but you can also sort of get a sense of how people lived at different periods in time. And so there are two rooms that I really like in this house. One is the John Rockefeller dressing room, which was built in 1880 in New York City. And I really like, John Rockefeller was one of the most wealthy people at the time in America. And I really like sort of the beautiful handiwork and the lovely woodwork, as you can see here. This was his dressing room where he would dress for the day. And then there's also an exterior shot included as part of the exhibit in the Rockefeller House in 1864, so a little bit before he moved in. But as you can see, New York was pretty, this was in like Midtown Manhattan, like probably around here. And as you can see, New York was pretty rural and not very developed. Definitely a far cry from the New York we know today. Just 30 years later, Frank Lloyd Wright, who is probably one of the most famous American architects and who created the mid-century modern movement, built this house in Minnesota. And its flat lines were meant to evoke the vast American plains. As you can see here, this is the exterior of the house. I don't know if you see it. I don't really see it, but please let me know if you can see how this would be symbolic of like the Midwest. The exterior of the Met is no less pretty than the art inside of it. There are huge steps leading up to it, made famous by the TV show Gossip Girl. I don't know if anyone has seen it. On either side of the two steps are beautiful fountains. Our next stop is Grand Central Station, which is located right here. Grand Central Station is probably one of my favorite places in New York City. I go to school about 2 hours away, and so I often take the train to get to university. And every time I walk into Grand Central, I'm always in awe of the beauty, and it feels like such an event, even to just take the train. Grand Central was constructed in the early 1900s with those high ceilings, as you can see here, and these beautiful windows that let light stream in. But the most exceptional part of Grand Central Station are the constellations and the decorated ceilings. I don't know if you can see it, but constellations were carefully painted onto the ceiling, and there are little lights embedded where the stars would have been. It is really, really beautiful. It creates such a lovely effect. And every time I travel there, I notice something new or something I hadn't seen. In the center of the lobby, there's a large clock, which you can see here, and it's somewhat of a landmark. So if you're trying to meet someone, you might say, oh, let's meet by the clock at this and this time. Grand Central is not just a train station, but there's a lot of other things to do there. There are almost 60 places to eat, with all different sorts of food, from burgers and fries to ice cream to Nordic food to Italian food. There's also a small market where you can buy chocolates, produce, and cheese. There's also the Transit Museum in Grand Central where you can learn about subways and trains over the years. There are also some concerts or events in Grand Central. Every year there's a big squash tournament, racquetball, which is somewhere around here. They like build a big dome and you can sort of come by and watch people in this glass dome playing racquetball. And not many people know this. This is sort of a New York secret, but there's actually a full-size tennis court inside Grand Central where you can play a game up until 12 in the morning. So if you have a very late commute, you can go and play tennis. And thousands of people travel through here every single day. The Empire State Building is probably the most famous building in all of New York. At the time it was built, it was the tallest building in the world, a record it maintained from 1931 to 1970. It began to be built in 1929, right at the beginning of the Great Depression. It was also built, by the way, it's right here. It was also built at the time where there was a lot of pressure to build skyscrapers, like sort of a skyscraper race. And so there were a lot of time constraints and pressure to get the building completed as fast as possible. And so workers worked on the building for almost 12-hour days. As you can see here, they worked even under pretty dangerous conditions. As construction neared the finishing point, blimps were used to get materials to the top of the Empire State Building, because you can imagine it was just almost impossible to get things all the way to the tippy top. It was designed in the Art Deco style, which is a popular architectural style at the 19th century, known for its sort of clean lines and cubist shapes. Some like old movie theaters in America also have this sort of like really beautiful fluid look. So some might not know this, but the spire at the top of the Empire State Building was actually added like several hours before construction. As I mentioned at the time, there was a lot of pressure to create the tallest building in New York. And the Chrysler Building, which is not very far away, was built first. And they decided at the last minute that they were going to add a spire to make their building taller than the plans for the Empire State Building. And the architects of the Empire State Building became very worried. You know, the importance of this building was not just in like its beauty, but was also in the fact that it was going to be the world's tallest building. So they scrambled, they built some more floors, and it was only going to be about 4 feet taller than the Chrysler Building. And the architects became very concerned, and they decided that they were also going to build a spire on top, just so that, you know, the Chrysler Building wouldn't be able to extend their spire a little bit and make their building a little bit taller. And the idea behind this is that it would be a place for blimps to dock. Unfortunately, they tried it, but New York is pretty windy, and it was very, very difficult, especially at that high height, to dock the Empire State Building, to dock blimps on the Empire State Building. And because it was built during the Great Depression, it became a symbol to New York City of perseverance, as it was built under very difficult conditions, but became sort of a world-famous building and the tallest building in the world that everybody knew about. Every night, the building is lit up in different colors. It's usually white here, but tonight it's actually going to be lit up blue and orange to honor the New York City hockey team, the Islanders, on their first game of the season. Our next stop is the Highline, which is located right here. It's around 3 kilometers long, and it's an elevated park that stands above the street. It used to be a train track, but unfortunately, it was not a very safe train track, and there were a lot of accidents there, and it was decommissioned, and it was out of use for many years, like 25 years, until 2009 when the park reopened. And it drastically changed the neighborhood because it created a green space that was very accessible in a place that did not previously have a lot of parks and felt pretty crowded. As you can see here, it has a stunning view of the Hudson River, and there's a lot of public sculptures and art. It's sort of like a New York jungle. Like, you can see that the trees grow over the tracks, and it creates this like this beautiful feeling like you're in the middle of the forest, but then you look around and you see all these buildings and you realize you're actually in the middle of a really big city. And it has a very interesting design because the train tracks were abandoned for so long. There was a lot of plants and vegetation that grew there naturally. And then rather than try to create these like very manicured gardens and change the natural structure, the landscape designers decided to work with many of the plants that grew on the tracks. And they cultivated these long grasses, like you can see here, and vines that give the Highline its sort of really nice overgrown look. Think about this park in comparison to Central Park. Do you notice any differences? How are both of the parks constructed and utilizing their natural surroundings? In my view, Central Park, which was completely 100% man-made and constructed, sort of works against nature. But the Highline works with nature to create something equally as beautiful. So our next stop is Chinatown, which is located right here in Lower Manhattan. Seeing as today is the International Day of Friendship, I wanted to talk a bit about some of the different people that live in New York City. New York City is home to people who descend from almost every country in the world. In fact, Queens, a borough of New York, is considered to be one of the most linguistically diverse places in the world. 160 languages are spoken there. In Manhattan, there are many designated neighborhoods from people hailing from all over the world, such as Little Ukraine, Little Dominican Republic, Little Italy, and Little Brazil. Today, I want to talk about one such neighborhood in Lower Manhattan, Chinatown. Chinatown is home to over 100,000 Asian Americans, most descending from East Asia. Starting in the 1960s, Chinatown became a major destination for Asian immigrants. And today, Chinatown is home to a flourishing Asian American community. There are many community centers, dedicated supermarkets where you can buy Chinese goods, and delicious restaurants serving up dim sum. Every February, Chinatown comes alive for celebrations of Chinese New Year that really cannot be missed. There's a large parade going that thousands of people participate in. And one of the coolest things about living in New York is its diversity and the wide array of people who live there. And if you come to New York, I hope you visit Chinatown to learn more about this really cool place. Our final stop on the tour is the Financial District. Located almost at the tip of Manhattan, right here, the Financial District and its surrounding areas are really the heart of Manhattan. Many government buildings are located there, in addition to many commercial and financial institutions. It's also one of the oldest parts of New York. It was once a part of New Amsterdam, which is the early Dutch settlement in New York. Its location, right in between two major rivers, made it an ideal port. Because this part of New York is so old, unlike many other parts of Manhattan, as you can see here, it's pretty much on a grid. The streets are placed somewhat haphazardly. It can be a little bit hard to navigate, but it's still very cool and beautiful. And also many streets are made out of cobblestone, which you can see here, instead of pavement. It is not fun to ride a bike down there. One thing you might not have known about New York is it was actually America's first capital city. George Washington, the first president, was sworn in on Wall Street in 1789. Although Wall Street is now synonymous with financial institutions, it wasn't always this way. Only after the building of the Erie Canal in the early 1800s, which is located in upstate New York, and connected New York City with the rapidly industrializing Midwest, did New York become the center of commerce that it's known to be today. New York City was with the building of the Erie Canal, New York City was an easy midpoint between Europe and the Midwest. Today, the New York Stock Exchange, which you can see here, is home to where you can buy and sell stocks, and is located in the Financial District. As I mentioned before, the Financial District is also home to many New York City government offices, such as the Dinkins Municipal Building, which was considered to pretty much be a skyscraper at the time it was built. And as if you can sort of see on the top, there's a little statue. It's a really beautiful gold statue of a woman who's meant to symbolize liberty in the city of New York. Not far away is the Brooklyn Bridge, which was built in 1883 to connect Manhattan with Brooklyn. And at the time it was built, it was one of the earliest suspension bridges. As you can see here, there are these cables to hold it up. And One World Trade Center here is also located in the Financial District, and it stands close to where the Twin Towers in the World Trade Center once stood. But my favorite part of the Financial District is the South Street Seaport, which you can see a picture of here. The buildings are, it's where some of the early Manhattan, it's where an early Manhattan port once stood. And as you can see here, the buildings are done in a really beautiful row house style. And the streets are made out of cobblestone. And it sort of looks like you're going back in time to when this actually was a port. The buildings were all built in around the 16 and 1700s. And here, as you can see, there is an old ship docked in the seaport, which you can board and go sort of see what, a ship in the 1800s looked like. And when I was there on Wednesday, there was actually a movie shoot going on, which happens pretty regularly. If you get lucky, you can walk around and see different movie shoots. And I know a famous actress named Gina Rodriguez was shooting there. So I got to see her, which was cool. You can't really see her in the picture, but she was there. And sometimes if you're in the right place at the right time, you can spot some pretty cool celebrities in New York City. So thank you so much for joining me on this tour. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned some things about New York that you might not have otherwise known. And I'm looking forward to answering your questions. Oh, I don't think we can. Oh,
Sorry.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Naomi. It was a very, very exciting tour of New York. We have a couple of questions coming from our viewers, and then we'll go to ACQ's questions, okay?
Sure.
All right, so first question from Dilnoza. She's asking, why is New York called the Big Apple?
Oh my, I really don't know. I'm sorry. Let me look this up quickly. I'm not sure. Can we go to the next one and I'll get back
Yes.
to
Sure,
Dilnoza? I'm sorry.
So we had a question when you were talking about the Met. Just a sec.
Okay, wait, I looked it up. I have an answer for Dilnoza.
Okay.
So there were a lot of racing courses for, I think, horses like around New York City. And when you would win a big prize, it was called a Big Apple. This is what this website claims, but the city adopted it as their nickname in 1971 for tourism. There was really bad issues with the city in the 70s. And so a lot of things that are iconic about New York, like the I Heart New York, were adopted them to try to get tourists to come. In my view, it's not that good of a nickname, but I guess they decided to call it the Big Apple. So that's a good question. You stumped me.
Thanks so much. That's good to know. So when you were talking about the Met, Otabek asked if those places are close to JFK Airport.
It's about an hour away by train, maybe a little bit less if you drive, but it's not super close. It's located JFK is located in Queens and the Met is located in Manhattan. So it's not super close. You couldn't necessarily, walk there. You would have to take a train or a car.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. One more question from our audience. Can you say more about landscape design on Highline?
Sure. So as I was writing this presentation, I was thinking about the Highline in contrast with Central Park. They're both pretty famous parks that people like to visit. And Central Park it's a man-made park. Everything in there is man-made. There's nothing native about it. It's not like they protected land and decided to make a park from it. They kicked people out of their homes and they decided to make a park there. And as a result, it's very manicured and there's a lot of thoughts to what people might need where they should have lawns. But on the Highline, they tried to use a lot more plants that had been growing there and tried to sort of, I think they visited the Highline or the train tracks before they made it a park, and they really liked the feel of it being sort of overgrown in this like wild jungle space. And they decided to keep all of the plants or try to be mindful about incorporating the plants into their landscape design. And it creates, again, like a really, really beautiful look. And yeah, I think that's it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So I think we'll get back to our questions from our virtual audience. And now we'll talk with ACQ a little bit. Do you guys have questions?
Presentation now. Yes. Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you. Yes.
Now, okay. First of all, I would like to say thank you to Naomi for the incredibly interesting presentation. It was really interesting. Yes, we learned a lot. And we will be looking forward to other presentations in August, every Friday at the same time. And I believe our listeners have questions. I'm going to invite them. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Who wants to ask questions?
Hello.
Hi.
My name is Hamida. You spoke about Chinatown. It was very interesting for me. Are there any towns, small towns, like Russian town, Mexico town? Can you speak about?
Sure. So there's Little Ukraine, which is located in the East Village, and a lot of Ukrainian people have traditionally lived there. There's a lot of Ukrainian churches and other sorts of things. But there are also a lot of neighborhoods that are known for a lot of people living there. For example, some of you might have heard of Brighton Beach, which is a really popular neighborhood for people who are Russian speakers. And I think a lot of people from Uzbekistan currently live there today. I really like Little Ukraine. I think it's super beautiful. And there's a lot of the Ukrainian Museum is interesting. There's also Little Brazil, which is located in Midtown. I don't think that many Brazilian people live there anymore, but there's a lot of Brazilian restaurants there. There's Koreatown, which is located close to the Empire State Building, actually. And there's a lot of, great Korean restaurants. I love Korean food, so I go there a lot to eat. And there is a lot of Korean stores. So there are a lot of different neighborhoods all over New York City, not just in Manhattan, where people from all different countries live.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Great question.
Hi, Naomi. So
Hi.
I wanted to ask you about Statue of Liberty. Could you tell some information about that? About visiting?
Sure. I thought about including it in my presentation. I took the ferry home from the Lower Manhattan in the hopes that I could get a picture, but it didn't end up working out. The Statue of Liberty is located on an island not far from Manhattan called Ellis Island. And it was a gift from France to celebrate the 100th birthday of America. So it was given, I think, in 1876, but it took a really, really long time to get over here. As you can imagine, it is very, very large. And back in the day, there were not that many effective ways to move huge statues all across the world. And so they had to split it up into different parts and reassemble it here. It originally was made out of bronze, I think, and then over the years it's become green just due to wear and tear. And it's supposed to symbolize Lady Liberty. She's holding up her torch, and it's supposed to be a symbol to everybody coming to America and immigrating there, because Ellis Island was the place where it was a lot of people's first stops when they immigrated to America, and it was meant to symbolize like the promise of America and the freedom that one could get when one moved to America.
Okay, thank you. That was interesting.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi.
Let's take this question and then we'll get back to our audience, okay?
Okay. So my question is about the costs. I mean, how much does it cost to the New York City for about 2 days? I mean, recently I've been successfully admitted to the university, which is located in Ohio, and I think I would have a chance to travel there once I get to the Ohio.
To Ohio?
Yeah.
Well,
Ohio.
congratulations on being admitted to university. That's great. It definitely depends on where you are. I will definitely say that New York can be pretty expensive, especially compared to other parts of America. I don't know how much hotels cost. I know that there are youth hostels sort of around New York, which are probably going to be cheaper. But if you try to keep it low cost, I think you could probably do it for around $50 a day, maybe. I don't know how much the lodging is, though. But definitely a lot of the things I mentioned are, except for going up the Empire State Building, which is really expensive, a lot of the things I mentioned today are free or low cost or cost optional. So keep notes from today and maybe there will be some cool things for you to do.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move to our questions from the audience. Stay there. Don't go away. Let's read a couple of questions. Just be there. A couple of questions from our audience, and we'll get back to you. Or maybe let's read your. Go ahead. Ask your question. Yeah.
Hi, Naomi. At the moment, I'm so glad after hearing your useful information, and I felt as if I had been in New York and saw everything with my own eyes. And at the moment, I planned one thing, and nowadays I'm preparing for writing articles in English about games which can be played during our English lessons. And I have one question for you. How can we print our articles in New York? And is it possible? And I want about also costs.
Plan
Thank you
your
for your
what? I'm
answer.
sorry, do you mind repeating that? I apologize.
Oh, can you repeat? I can't
Yeah.
hear you.
Oh yeah, do you mind repeating your question? I apologize.
I want nowadays I'm preparing for writing English articles, and I wanna my articles printed in foreign countries. In this place, I want to ask about print publication in New York. In New York, can you say something about it?
Sure. So New York is probably the publication center of America. All the major publishing houses, like the ones who might publish your books, from Simon and Schuster to like Penguin, they have headquarters in New York. And there are a lot of famous magazines and newspapers that are based in New York, like New York Times, New York Magazine, and the New Yorker. But there are also a lot of small magazines or regional papers that you could also try to publish your article in. I don't know what it's about, but you could try to look up something that might be of interest if it's about a particular community or topic. There are also a lot of blogs online and things like that. So there are definitely unfortunately, a lot of journalism in New York or in America is no longer in a newspaper and a magazine. A lot of it is online. So probably looking at blogs is a good idea also. And there's a lot of publication in New York, of course.
Thank you. In this place, I have also one question. And while you were speaking about Highline, I was surprised by its green nature. I mean, there are a lot of evergreen trees, very high trees, and everywhere are green. And I want to know about the weather. And can you speak about it?
The
Weather.
the weather. Okay. I'm sorry. New York has, I think, it has a not dissimilar climate from Tashkent, except I think it gets a little colder here. It's really cold in the winters. It snows. It gets close to 0 degrees Celsius. And then in the summers, it gets really hot, I think more than 30 usually. And so it can be pretty difficult to grow trees and other plants here because a lot of them die in the winter. But of course, evergreens remain all year round. So there are a lot of evergreens in the parks in New York City, a lot of, oak trees and things like that that are sort of native to this area. And the Highline has a lot of flowers like echinacea and things like that. But the weather it's not the best part of living in New York. Let's say that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, ACQ. Let's get some questions from our audience from other places. So Oman is saying he hasn't visited New York so far, but he heard that the streets are filled with trash and the subway is kind of filthy. Is it real? Why does that happen?
Thank you, Amon, for your question. I do not think that the streets are filled with trash. There definitely is. People put their trash bags out on the street for pickup. For whatever reason, we don't have big dumpsters to put your trash in. But I think hopefully things are going to start to change soon because it's a little bit of a crazy system. I don't necessarily think that it's much dirtier than any major city. 8 million people live there. And if you put 8 million people in a pretty tight-knit area, it definitely, regardless of where you live, it might not be the cleanest experience. And so, is it real? A little bit. It's not that filthy. I don't want to lie to you though. It's a major city and a lot of people live there. And as for why that happens, it's a big population center and big cities get very dirty.
Thanks so much. Our next question from Ayub Khan. He's asking to tell us something about Trump Tower.
Sure. So Trump Tower is located on 55th and 5th, I think. It's sort of in Midtown Manhattan. I don't think I've ever been there. It's pretty close to Columbus Square or Columbus Circle, which is also sort of in the 60s. Other than that, I don't really know that much about it. I know that there's a restaurant up top, which is pretty popular, but it's just a very tall building sort of in the center of Manhattan.
Thank you. Question from Aziz. How can you describe your time at Yale?
I would say that it has been busy and it has involved a lot of hard work. I often am in the library for 10 hours a day, just studying and revising. I study a lot. I don't think everybody does that, but I mean, you definitely can study less than I do, but I like to study and get good grades. And it's a really, really beautiful place. The architecture is stunning. It's meant to look like Cambridge and Oxford, so it has sort of that English vibe. And I really like the professors, and it has been a really good experience where I've learned so much and grown a lot. So,
thank you. Question from Dania. Could you please tell us about the Times Square ball drop tradition?
Sure. I have never been to the Times Square ball drop. I've seen it a couple times on TV, but pretty much all of Times Square shuts down. And there is a really large ball in the middle of Times Square that is timed to drop right as the new year starts. So for the couple of hours leading up before, there are news broadcasts and performances in in Times Square. And it's really, really, really cold. So you can see the performers sort of shivering, like Mariah Carey went a couple of years ago, and you can tell that you're just not having a good time. And it's fun to watch, especially from home, because the newscasters will start to get, a little bit drunk on air to celebrate the new year. And it is really, really fun to watch and funny. And the ball drops right as New Year hits, as I mentioned. It's lit up in all these different colors, and it's meant to just bring in the new year.
Thank you. So we'll get one more question from our audience, and then we'll come back to ACQ. So ACQ, be ready to ask questions. Question from Amon. What jobs are popular in New York? How much one needs to earn to live a decent life in New York?
A lot of service jobs are pretty popular in New York. So working in a restaurant, maybe being like a cab driver or an Uber driver, those are pretty popular jobs. I mean, again, it's a really large city, so there are a lot of different jobs and industries. I don't know how, again, for how much one needs to earn a decent living, it definitely depends. It depends on where you live, and it depends on what you're interested in doing. I'm trying to think of other jobs. There's some finance jobs that are pretty popular. As I said before, New York is known for its financial district and for being, one of the centers of commerce in America. So there are a lot of people work in fields related to that, or in real estate. But it definitely depends on the sort of life you want to live as to how much you need to make.
Thanks so much. ACQ, do you have questions?
Hi, my name is Sarah, and I would like to, I was a participant of summer enrichment program here, so it was wonderful. And I have a question. I would like to know about lifestyle of teenagers in New York. So I'm also a teenager, and that's why I'm interested in that.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for your question. It definitely depends. I know I've said that a lot. In general, people don't have a backyard, so you tend to, meet up with your friends in the park or something like that. And I find that New York City teens are always really active and doing things and going to museums or events or things like that. And anytime there's something free that's cool that's announced, like a free concert or a free show, teens are always there having a good time. And I'm trying to think what else. There's a lot of movie theaters to go to. And so teens are always getting up to interesting stuff because there's a lot of interesting stuff to do.
So, thank you very much.
Of course.
Thank you. Do you guys have more questions, or do
I don't think no questions so far. Thank you,
Okay,
Naomi,
well,
and Gulshan. You continue. Yeah.
Thank you. Then we'll get back to our questions from our viewers from YouTube and Facebook. So Ayupon is asking, can you tell us about cheap universities that give high quality knowledge for foreign students?
So in general, higher education in America is extremely expensive. I don't really know why. It's just extremely, extremely expensive. In terms of universities, there are a lot of community colleges or two-year programs that tend to be much more reasonably priced, and in some cases offer valuable skills to students, like learning how to be, a technician of some kind or something like that. There are also state schools or that are much cheaper than private institutions. In New York, we have a really good City University of New York system, which has, I think, like 30 universities and community colleges that are all pretty reasonably priced, especially compared to other education in America. There's also, state universities of New York, which tend to be around the same cost for tuition, but living is a little bit more expensive because you live in dorms instead of on your own. And so I would look into checking out state schools or community colleges if you're looking for a cheaper university.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Ayupon is continuing his question about education. Where can we get information about American universities? Can you share the websites?
There's not really one website for all of all of the universities because there are so many. Gulshan, do you have any information on this?
Yes, I can actually help with that. We have a special Education USA advising center here at the embassy. So you can talk to a professional advisor who can give you information on the universities in the US. You can do it if you do not live in Tashkent. You can do it online. You can call. I'm putting the website. It's on the US Embassy website. I'm putting the link in the comments, so you could go there and check information and see the contact information. All right. Next question, very interesting question from Gulnazar Jabava. She's asking, in London, there are some places which are free. Are there any museums in New York which tourists can visit for free? Thank you.
So the Met used to be free. Now it's pay what you want. So that means that if you don't want to pay anything, you don't have to. And if you do want to pay something, you can. So that's an example of a free museum. There are also some museums that are free on certain days. I think the Jewish Museum, which has a lot of Jewish art, there's a large Jewish community in America. That museum is free on Saturdays. I'm not sure what else, but there are definitely some free museums. Really recommend checking out the Met. And I think there are other museums that are where you can choose how much you want to pay.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Can you describe more beautiful places which include trees and flowers in New York? I guess.
Sure. There are a lot of other pretty large parks. I live very close to Riverside Park, which is along the Hudson River, which I've mentioned a few times. It's a very important spot. And that park, although not as big as Central Park, it's sort of like a little strip, also has some really beautiful trees and flowers. There are also, as I mentioned, a lot of places outside New York. I really like the Hudson Valley. It's, like, as I said before, it's like one of my most favorite places. It's about 2 hours away from New York. And they have all these really beautiful, like, little mountains and cliffs and trees. And the best part about living in New York is that the trees turn the most beautiful colors in the fall. And so you walk around and everything is like lit up in red and orange and yellow, with some green, but it makes for a really, really beautiful fall season.
Wow.
And there's also, just to go back to that for 1 second, there's also 2 botanical gardens in New York, the Brooklyn and the Bronx Botanical Garden, where you can go look at more trees and flowers, but in a more like controlled environment where they cultivate it and try to plant that sort of stuff.
Cool.
Yeah.
Babarjan is asking, can you tell us about Central Asian students in New York?
Gulshan, can I defer to you on this? I don't know how much I know. I haven't met any Central Asian students in New York.
You haven't?
No.
I don't have any official information on that too. I don't know. So I guess no in Yale. Actually, we
I think I know 2 Central Asian students at Yale, or in like at least the undergraduate program, but I don't know very many.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Could you tell us, question from Shirzad, something about Fifth Avenue in New York?
Sure. So it's located on the east side, which is not far from where the Met is. And it's actually, the Met is on Fifth Avenue, and it's known for being one of the fanciest, or at least it was once the fanciest place to live. There are all these really big, beautiful buildings, and a lot of really nice apartment buildings. There's also, I think, Museum Mile is on Fifth Avenue. There are a lot of museums up and down, and it is really close to the park, so it's a really nice place to visit.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna ask American Connor Karshi, if you guys have questions, just raise your hands and we'll refer to you, okay? Okay, I see someone coming.
In this place, I want to know about e-libraries in New York. I mean, is there any libraries which we can read e-books? Can you share something?
I don't know if you can get the ebooks from the library. In general, you need to be a member of the library in order to check out ebooks. But there is the New York Public Library System, which is extremely large. There are branches all over New York. And in Midtown Manhattan, not very far from Grand Central, there is the big branch of the New York Public Library, which is really beautiful. It was also built around the 1800s, I think, and it's very old. I'm not sure if you can take out ebooks from there, but you should definitely see and try to figure it out. There's also a lot of free ebooks online for books written more than 100 years ago, just because they lose the copyright. So if there's any book that you want that was written more than 100 years ago, you can usually find the ebook for free, even not with a library.
And also, I want about transport system in New York, because I know this city is very big, and I wonder how people travel to their work, to get to their work, or teenagers, how can they get to their school?
Sure.
Are there any buses, trolley buses, or own cars?
Sure. So there are, in Manhattan, there are subways. All over New York, there are subways. That's probably the main source of transportation. There are also buses that a lot of people take. Most people in like more densely populated areas, so in like Manhattan and some parts of Brooklyn and Queens, don't own cars because it's extremely difficult to find parking. But as you move out into places where people own, like have single family homes, people do tend to own cars there. But I would say that there's also a ferry system where you can take boats from places to places, because Manhattan is an island. And so in some cases, it's much easier to take a boat from certain parts of Manhattan or from certain parts of Brooklyn to one another. But definitely, I would say that subways are the main system of transit.
Are there also bicycles?
Yes, there are a lot of people who bicycle, and there's a bike share program called City Bike. And so for almost the same price as going on the subway, you can rent a bicycle for around 30 minutes, I think, and go wherever you need to go. And there are a lot of bike lanes, which makes it really accessible to bicyclists.
Okay, thanks for your answers.
Of course.
Thank you. So let's get back to questions from our viewers. Avazbek is asking, what is your favorite restaurant and food?
My favorite sort of food is Korean food. I really like it, and there's this really good supermarket in Koreatown called Wojirip, which sells a lot of really delicious prepackaged Korean food. And it's not a very expensive place to eat, and I would recommend going there. That's probably one of my favorite restaurants in New York. There's also a Georgian restaurant not very far from where I live that I go to sometimes, especially if it's like a celebration or something exciting. But yes, I would recommend going to Wojirip if you're in New York.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Nargis is asking, she's wondering if you have tried Uzbek pulao.
Yes, I have been to, I was in Kyrgyzstan for study abroad 2 summers ago for about a month, and I had a lot of plov there. I think it was Uzbek style, I hope. And then in New York, there is a good number of Uzbek restaurants, and I've tried some of them, and I've had plov there. I don't generally eat a lot of meat. I used to be a vegetarian before I came to Central Asia, and then I had to stop. But it is still really, really delicious and a very good food.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And we're getting a lot of questions about universities. And I just want to tell you that, I don't know, Naomi, I'm opening a secret, but you're going to have a session with our educational advisor. So you guys can wait for that session, and maybe our education advisor together with Naomi will answer all the questions about education. But I don't know, Naomi, if you probably know, there is a question from Turab Khan. What are some reliable universities for pursuing online MBA? Are there one-year MBA programs?
I think one of the city universities of New York has a 1-year online MBA program. But you would have to look into that and see what the situation is. I don't happen to know offhand, but I do know about that one program.
Mm-hmm. Okay. English Cabinet is asking, are there any kind of work and travel programs for foreign students? And if so, where can we get full information about those programs? Do you know any programs at your university?
For work and travel? No, I don't think so. I mean, I know a lot of people will work as like an au pair or a nanny as a means of doing work and travel. But other than that, I'm not sure offhand. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Sohrab is asking, what major is Yale University famous for?
We're known for having 2 big programs. One is in economics and one is in political science, and those are considered to be our really good programs. And then there's a joint program between the 2 called Ethics, Politics, and Economics, which is joining philosophy, political science, and economics, and that's also a pretty famous major. But in general, we're very strong on the social sciences and, to an extent, the humanities.
Thank you. Another question. You mentioned the TV show Gossip Girl was shot in New York. Are there any other TV shows about people from New York?
There are a lot of shows. Friends is about people from New York. Gulshan, can you think of any?
Spider-Man, was he from New
Yeah,
York?
Spider-Man, he's from New York. They do a lot of shots of New York there.
Yeah. Oh, the one about the huge gorilla. What is it?
King Kong, yeah, he
Kong.
climbs up the Empire State Building.
Yeah.
That's in New York.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right.
But there are a lot. You should look up a list. There are too many to name here.
Yeah. I also want to apologize. I cannot read some of the names. I don't know how to pronounce some of the names. So you guys, we have it on the screen, so you guys can read who asked the question. I want to ask American Connor Karshi if you guys have any questions, because we're wrapping up soon. Your last chance.
If not, there's always next week and the next few weeks. So
Okay, last question from American Connor Karshi.
Hello, Naomi. I've got a question about universities. Which universities do you recommend for students from Uzbekistan?
I think that is a question best addressed to the education program, which Gulshan, I think you gave information for. I don't know what the best universities are, but I know that there is somebody at the embassy who does know.
Mm-hmm.
And which popular universities are located in New York? Can you tell about this?
Sure. So as I mentioned a couple of times, all the city universities of New York, Hunter, Queens are all located in New York City. Those are definitely popular because there are so many of them, and so the most students go to them. In terms of other universities, Columbia University is located on the Upper West Side. New York University is located downtown. And those are probably it for big universities that you might have heard of.
Okay. Thanks for information.
Of course.
Thank you for questions. So let's take the last question from our audience, and then we'll wrap up. Maksat Bek is asking, what makes Yale unique among the Ivy League colleges?
Well, that's presuming that it is unique. I don't know that it is, but I can tell you what people think makes it unique, which is that it's supposed to be a bit more artistic and free-spirited than a place like Harvard. We do have different professors. We have there are a lot of things that are the same as other Ivy League colleges, such as Harvard. Also, we have like a college system where everybody gets sorted into a college where they live and they make friends there. Harvard has the same sort of system. And a lot of schools also have the same good programs. So I would say that it's pretty similar to a lot of other really good schools. The only difference is that it's supposed to have a little bit more of a relaxed vibe. When I was visiting, they always said, Yale is collaborative, not competitive. And so it's not supposed to be as competitive as other schools. Whether or not that's true, it depends on your experience, but that's what they say. So
that's great. Thanks so much, Naomi. This was a wonderful, wonderful information. Thanks so much. We learned a lot about New York. And I also want to thank our friends from American Connor Karshi for joining us today with their questions. Thanks, guys. And I want to thank our people who joined us on Facebook and YouTube Live with their wonderful questions too. And I want to tell everyone that this is not the last Chai Chat with Naomi. Next Friday, she will be talking about famous American female athletes. And if you want to hear about it, please join us at 5 p.m. next Friday. Naomi, thanks so much. It's a pleasure to have you with us throughout this whole month.
Great. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for coming.
Have a good day, Naomi, and have a good evening, Karshi, and everyone else. Bye-bye.